Hey, welcome to Optimize Your Body with Martin Silva, where we talk raw, uncut facts to truly help you optimize your body. Hey guys, thank you very much for tuning into episode 65 of Optimize Your Body. Today I'm going to be talking about the dreaded plateau, however you want to pronounce it. Essentially, when you stop making progress in the gym and you stop seeing results, very frustrating place to be. And I have a lot of people asking me these questions on my Instagram, and I see it happening time and time again. You may be able to relate to this, and obviously I can relate to it myself, hitting the dreaded plateau and having a halt in progress, if you like. You feel like you're putting the work in, and sometimes I'll come to this, but you're putting too much work in. You're overworking the body, and you're sending conflicting signals in terms of building muscle and actually getting results. You have to be in a really healthy state, and if there's lots of, once you do make a lot of progress, for example, anyone who's listening to this can relate. When you first start lifting weights, for example, and I'm just going to assume most of you do lift weights if you're this far into this podcast, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. You'll still be able to get some good takeaways from this. But I am going to link this particular episode of 3 reasons why you have hit a plateau and why you can't push through that plateau and continue to make progress. I'm going to link it to you getting in better shape. I'm going to assume if you're listening to this, you want to be in better shape. Yes, of course, it all relates to health, and I always talk about health being a number one priority. Making that your number one, making your wellness, your overall wellness, the top priority. As I said, the big rock. Okay, don't worry about the pebbles, taking this and that supplement and, doing all this stuff which doesn't really make a big difference. Focus on the big rocks: sleep, exercise, nutrition, relationships, as I always mention. So, as I said, health is wealth, right? So that should be the number one priority always. However, I'm going to identify this with people who want to look better, is what I'm trying to say. So, number one, first reason why you've plateaued is because you're not training properly. Not necessarily not training properly. You may still have good technique with, again, I'm going to relate this to weightlifting. You may be lifting weights properly with good form. However, if you have hit a plateau and you're not building any more muscle, you're not seeing any visible changes, or your strength is not improving, then the chances are you need to come out of whatever you're doing and start a new adaptation for the body. Now, I'm going to give you an example. It used to frustrate me, but now I just laugh about it, because I used to be exactly the same in terms of people saying, no, this works for me. This is what works for me. So no, but this is what works for me, for my body, right? The problem is what people do, and as I said, I've done this myself. You look in the mirror at some point after doing a particular type of training or dieting, whatever that is. Obviously, I hate that word dieting, but a lot of people have followed certain diets or whatever. So I'll use that as an example. Someone has followed the keto diet for 4 weeks. They look in the mirror. They're in the shape of their life. In terms of, they're the leanest they've ever been, maybe, right? No shit. They've probably gone from eating way too many calories to being in a massive calorie deficit. Hence why they've lost the weight. Same goes for any high intensity kind of fad, if you like. Let's use CrossFit as an example. I always like to go to town on them. But someone who's done, someone who swears by CrossFit because it got them in the shape of their life. Again, they've probably done it for a short period of time, seen some big changes in the mirror, felt good and thought, and that's it then. We then attach whatever that particular notion was, whether or not it was a particular way of eating or a particular way of training, we then attach that to, this is what works for me. I'm begging you to stop doing that. There's no such thing as this works for me. Don't get me wrong, certain types of exercises actually in general, people respond differently, slightly to different exercises, and genetically we are more adapted based on our DNA and, our genetic makeup to certain types of training. For example, I'm a lot more efficient with sprinting and fast twitch kind of movements and power movements. I've always been that way. In school, I was always one of the fastest, especially in primary school anyway. And I've always been, as I say, a sprinter, and I've always had a decent level of strength genetically. And then obviously all the time in the gym has amplified that. So don't get me wrong, certain people are going to respond differently to different things. However, looking at the bigger picture, if you've hit a plateau, right, you need to come out of this works for me. For example, strength training. A lot of people who do powerlifting, they swear by lifting heavy weights. This is what works for me. This is what gets results. Yes, that is specific to someone who is doing powerlifting. Yes, they need to lift heavy weights and focus on maximal strength and sometimes power and whatnot. But then they can attach that to this is what works for me and never come out of it and never move into or provide their body with any different types of stimulus. For example, those kind of people are adapted to doing lots of volume. Okay, so lots of sets. A powerlifter will generally do lots of sets and low reps. Let's just say 1 to 4 reps, hard and heavy. And they will say, yeah, well, my body responds better to this. Well, marginally, again, your body might respond better to that, but a lot of people will plateau from sticking in one type of training modality. For example, with me, I used to always think the 8 to 12 rep range and supersets and chasing that pump in the gym. I was like, no, this is what works for me, for my body. I'd always been in great shape, never changed it. Then I jumped over to doing strength training. I thought, I'll give this a crack. I want to build my strength up. Started lifting super hard and heavy, 1 to 5 reps, and bang, I blew up. I built muscle. And that's right, yeah, you will build a significant amount of muscle from doing strength training. It's a different type of, there's effectively different ways to build muscle. And yes, the 8 to 12 rep range hypertrophy kind of style training is generally the better suited rep range for building muscle. However, doing heavy weights, maximal strength, will 110% make you build muscle really fast, especially if you're used to doing higher reps like I was. Okay, so to break it down for you, okay, if you're training and you like lifting really heavy weights and strength training you believe works for you better and doing lots of volume, then guess what? The chances are you need to increase intensity. So try, instead of doing your 5 sets of 5 reps, for example, switch over to doing 2 or 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps with minimal rest, with 30 seconds rest in between. Okay, and go to failure each set. I don't normally recommend going to failure, but if you do need that kick of intensity, then it will definitely pay dividends doing that. And if you're the other way around, now most people fall into this category of too much intensity, even with weight training. Supersets, chasing the pump, like I said, I used to do. Don't want to get caught up in that. It's dangerous. Yes, you look good. I'm doing that kind of training right now, and I love it. I love the pump. I love feeling vascular and, feeling. I love that feeling, essentially. However, if you're doing that all of the time, then you need to switch over to doing more volume and less intensity. So, the 1 to 8 rep range, if you like, hard and heavy, multiple sets. It's pretty straightforward in that sense, really. So trust me on this now. If there's anything you can take away from this point of not training properly, it is whatever you are not doing, right, is what you need to be doing more of. For example, I'm going to give you another wild example here, mobility stretching. Every single person I have trained out of the over 1,000 people in my 12 years of PTing people, not one of them was perfectly balanced. Every single one of them had to do some form of mobility. Every single one. Granted, some more than others, okay? But that is something everyone needs to be doing. You can never, ever do enough mobility, okay? You just can't do enough. So, you can go over to my YouTube channel and check out some of my mobility stuff over there. Just type in Martin Silva Fitness on YouTube. And also, in terms of the type of training you're doing, most people do split routine training. Now, you always hear me preaching about training the full body. Absolute game changer for me when I switched over from doing 1 or 2 body parts per session to hitting the full body. So, you can go over to my website anyway, which is martinsilva.co.uk, martin-silva.co.uk, and you can just go over there and get a free training program anyway. The one on there is a split routine program, but it uses the same concepts of the full body. So the reason we created that is because we were getting lots of demands, because as I said, most people do split routine training. But most of you listening to this now, pretty much all of you, if you're not doing full body training and not hitting the whole body 2 to 3 times a week, then that is what you need to be doing. And if you've hit a plateau, that will get you straight out of it. And 80% of people should be doing full body most of the time anyway. There is definitely a place for split routine training, but it needs to be done properly as well. So most people don't have to hit the body parts often enough, which is one of the main perks of doing full body. You hit the body parts more frequently. I also have a training program on my website as well, a full body one. But yeah, just go over and get the free training program, and you'll see some of the concepts there anyway on my website. Also, too much cardio is a very common one. Now, don't get me wrong, some people think that I'm anti-cardio, but I'm really not. Cardiovascular training definitely has its place. Very important for overall health, as well as fitness, obviously, and several other factors. However, you need to make your mind up as to what goals you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to build an aesthetically pleasing physique, if you like, then your main focus should be building muscle, okay? So if you're doing little bits of cardio on the side, that's totally fine. However, if you're overdoing cardio, then you, once again, as I mentioned, you're going to be sending conflicting signals. On one hand, you're telling your body to try to build muscle if you're lifting weights. And on the other hand, then you're telling your body to get efficient at burning calories by doing cardio. So, what happens with cardio is if you're overdoing cardiovascular training, then your body, as I said, will get very efficient at burning calories. So what happens then is the actual resting metabolic rates, your metabolism essentially slows down because you're manually burning so many calories. So weight training does the opposite. Weight training boosts your metabolism because, as I've mentioned before, to keep muscle on your body is expensive. Muscle tissue is expensive. It costs your body a lot of calories. So don't overdo cardio. I would recommend sticking to low intensity cardio. I know another thing with cardiovascular type training is people love the high intensity stuff. And it's not something you really want to be doing. It's not something I'd recommend to hardly anyone. HIIT training is something I'll get people to do towards much later down the line. It's a tool you use when you have got insane results from eating right and lifting weights. I mean, it's great because it makes you feel good, and if you're an athlete, obviously there's always the minority that should be doing HIIT, using that as a tool, HIIT training, high intensity training. But remember, focus on one goal and smash it, right? So if you want to look good and you've hit a plateau with, I don't know, whether you're holding stubborn body fat or certain areas you're struggling to build up, train properly. Stop doing what you think works for you and try the other thing, as I went through earlier, okay? Moving on to number 2 is nutrition. So very simple, really. You're either under-eating or you're overeating, essentially. So a lot of people do actually under-eat. You'd be surprised how many people don't feed the body enough. So once again, they're training pretty hard, lifting weights regular, and they are not actually nourishing the body. So obviously what you put into your body is number one. So, a lot of people are not actually nourishing their body enough on a regular basis to put your body in that optimal state of health. However, most people are actually underfeeding the body calories and nutrients. So it could be a combination of the two. They're not putting enough nutrients in the body. Fat is a common one. A lot of people don't eat enough of a variety of fats, like healthy fats found in such, avocado, olive oil, nuts, those kind of things. And a lot of people don't actually eat adequate amounts of animal proteins as well, like egg yolks and, red meat. A lot of people are scared of eating too many of those things. But the bottom line is you're undernourishing the body, because saturated fats are very, very important for hormone production, amongst a lot of other things, as I've mentioned in previous podcasts and time again on my Instagram. So yeah, if you're underfeeding, if you're just kind of not eating a great deal, and you're not because to actually build your metabolism up and lose body fat long term, you have to go through certain phases where you're feeding your body enough food, enough nutrients. So you whenever you're hungry, you're eating whole foods for the most part, and you're not going against those hunger signals. If your goal is to build muscle, when you're hungry, you need to eat. So doing too much cardio and not eating enough, or just doing too much training in general and underfeeding the body, will actually slow your metabolism down. Your body's not going to be in a position where it's going to be building muscle, at all, if any at all. So pay attention to that one. Overeating, obviously, some people want to get leaner and lose body fat and whatnot. And then, it's quite simple, really. If they're not achieving that goal, it's not because, they went out on the weekend and had a pizza and a few drinks. It's not because, they have been eating the wrong kinds of foods every now and then. It's because they're not in a calorie deficit. So essentially their body is, they're eating more calories than what their body is burning. So if you plateaued in a sense where you can't shift body fat, you have stubborn body fat, or, you're not losing body fat, the chances are you're not in a calorie deficit, so you're overeating. Now, this is why I always say a great tool to use is the tracking devices you can get on the tracking apps you can get on phones to track your calorie intake. As I always mentioned, MyFitnessPal is the one I use and the one I get my clients to use. Be aware of the amount of calories you're having, because so many people say to me they're eating healthy and they're really not, because they've no idea. You really don't have any idea of what's going into your body in terms of how many calories you're eating, how much sugar you're having, fiber and all. Yes, you may have a rough idea, but even like when you're at a high level, you still should use tracking as a tool every now and then. It's not something you want to be doing for the rest of your life until you're eating intuitively, but you might think, listening to this, what works for your body once again in terms of, I'm eating healthy, but a lot of the time, until you start tracking, it's not until then that you actually realize, wow, I'm actually under eating protein, I'm having a bit too much sugar, I'm not quite hitting enough fiber, I'm not having as much a variety of fats. So, if you've plateaued, the chances are you could, and it's easy when you're having snacks and stuff like that, and sometimes we just eat without really being aware of it when we're snacking, but you can have like a handful of nuts, a little bit of yogurt, which you just don't really consider as part of because you've had your meals and whatever, and these habits we form, and it's only until you start tracking that you're like, wow, okay, so that handful of nuts, that little bit of dark chocolate, and that yogurt I had came up to an extra 500 calories. Add that up over a week, that's 3,500 calories. 3,500 calories equals exactly a pound of fat. So I think that's right. Yeah, it is. But so that gives you an example. Awareness is always the first step with anything in life, especially with nutrition and calorie control. So if you're not tracking and you've hit a plateau and you feel like you can't shift body fat, or you're gaining weight, or you feel like you're not getting leaner and whatnot, start tracking. Get the app and take that step. And another one, obviously, is not drinking enough water. That's a very common one. This all comes down to, as I mentioned, the big rocks. Okay, so just to slip that one in there, make sure you're drinking enough water. Continuously be drinking it. You shouldn't wait until you're thirsty until you drink. You should just be drinking out of habit. Keep a bottle with you. I've got one of those stainless steel bottles I take everywhere with me, 500 ml, and just keep drinking that all day. And you can't go wrong then, as long as you've got it handy, right? So that's very, very important, because obviously drinking water is going to aid weight loss and fat loss. in several ways. But, one example is water will release contaminants out of the cells, which reduces in fat, which reduces your body fat and whatnot. There's loads of different factors, really. So nutrients and calories, start tracking, figure out, what your body needs. And literally 95% of people need to build their metabolism up. So like I just mentioned, then you could be overeating. But most likely it's not necessarily you're just overeating, because overeating good quality whole foods is very hard to do. You're probably overeating the wrong kinds of foods, which will make you gain weight and plateau. But as I said, 95% of people, this is kind of sounding like I'm contradicting what I just said, but it's not if you hear me out. 95% of people actually need to build their metabolism up, which essentially means they need to focus on building muscle and building their metabolism up so their body is automatically burning more calories. In order to do that, you do have to feed the body an adequate amount, a sufficient amount. But if you're just doing that and you haven't got a solid training program where you're lifting weights properly, then obviously a lot of those calories are going to get partitioned into body fat. Whereas if you're lifting weights properly and you're focusing on eating enough, but eating the right foods, and as I mentioned earlier, eating when you're hungry and lifting weights and really making your top priority building muscle, then you will start charging your metabolism up. So as I said, 95% of people need to do that. But a lot of people have this illusion in their head where they feel like they're going to get fat if they eat, if they listen to their body and eat when they're hungry. But it's not about that. It's about, as I said, being aware of what you're eating the right types of foods, and not just eating any old crap when you're hungry. So all these things play a big part in it. Finally, number 3 is too much stress. I covered some of that then, but this is a very common one. Most of us nowadays are under more stress than we've ever been because of the day and age we live in. Whereas, when we were hunter-gatherers, for example, we would have had a extreme burst of stress when we were going to get attacked by a tiger and whatnot. We would get, a massive, huge fight or flight rush of stress, and we would either survive or die, essentially, right? That is the kind of stress we adapted to live with to survive, okay? But nowadays we live in a different era where we're under continuous amount of moderate to low to high stress, constantly switching around. When I say high stress, we're never under high stress, because high stress is you're going to starve to death or get eaten by a tiger. So let's just say that's high stress. We're under a constant state of like low to moderate stress where, we're sat in front of a computer all day long. We're on our phones way too much. As I said, we're not moving too much. We're not moving enough. A lot of us nowadays get, mental health is a massive thing nowadays, where, a lot of people are suffering with depression and anxiety. So, that's a constant state of stress. Everything, even when you're driving your car, you're still under a moderate state of stress. You're on the road, you know what I mean? You have to focus. It's even looking at your phone in the morning, as I mentioned last time, the first thing you get up in the morning, do not get up and go on your phone straight away, because that screen, that blue light, that email you've just checked, that social media you've just scrolled through, your body's still gonna pump out some of the stress hormones. So that is what we're dealing with nowadays. So it's a case of really trying to focus on having, as I mentioned on the last podcast, some kind of structure and routines around this, where you're having time out in the day to have time to yourself, and focus on techniques such as breathing, gratitude, all the stuff I mentioned before to help you de-stress. And as I mentioned about mobility, yoga is great because obviously you get the mental kind of side of it as well. So you're going to get the physical mobility, but also you have to kind of be present and slow things down when you're doing yoga. So most people need more of that kind of stuff. Most people listening to this, I can guarantee you need more of that stuff, meditation and yoga, to help you de-stress. Okay, so that is another massive contributor to people hitting a plateau, is too much stress, too much internal stress building up in the body. The body has absolutely no interest in building muscle and losing body fat when you're under way too much stress. Obviously, stress is essential to keep us alive. Lifting weights is a stress. The insult you put your muscles through in the gym helps your body respond in a way which is beneficial for your health by building muscle and bone density and whatnot. But, too much stress, like lack of sleep is a big one if you're not getting adequate sleep. And that's another one as well. And people say they get in, people like I coach, like, for example, someone I'm coaching online now, she didn't actually say anything like she is getting good sleep. She didn't say that, but she did. I asked her about, her sleep and stuff. I think I asked her about sleep, and she said, she wakes up, her daughter, or her kid anyway, wakes her up every night. But most people think nothing of that. So like they might wake her up for, 5-10 minutes, it could be. But that broken sleep really massively affects the quality of your sleep. So that's something I really had to take into account, when I was designing the program for her and whatnot. So a lot of people think they're getting good sleep, but, they don't, you shouldn't be waking up. You should be sleeping straight through. If, I'm not a perfect sleeper, but I wake up once normally on average a night, but, broken sleep and getting up to go to the toilet, that is affecting your sleep quality. So, which is going to, over time, that can compound. So focusing on good quality sleep is very, very important. And as I said, it's always the coming back to the same things: drinking enough water, training properly, but not overtraining, as I mentioned earlier, not under-eating. All these things will put your body under too much stress. And, one of the main ones is relationships as well. They've proven that people who have bad relationships with people are actually under an extreme amount of stress. I can't fully remember what the comparison was, but it's something like when someone who's constantly dealing with these bad relationships and arguments and whatnot and just unhappy with the relationships they have with people, it's something like the equivalence of being someone running up to you and punching you in the face or something like that. But so the stress hormones are going to be all over the place if you're in a state of, where you're dealing with bad relationships and you've got the wrong people around you. It's a massive contributor to detrimental health and overload of stress. So I just mentioned all the main things there. And on that note, as you guys know, I'm working with Sonic Sleep now. So blue light blockers, I'm wearing them now. I'm doing an evening podcast, and very good investment to help you with sleep quality. Chuck the blue light blockers on an hour or two before bed to block out all the light, artificial lights from your house, your phone, everything. Computer, whack them on. They've been proven to help a lot with sleep. And if you do decide to get them, obviously go over to swanicsleep.com and you can use my code for 20% off. Optimize Your Body is the code, all one word. Optimize Your Body. You get 20% off. So number 3 was too much stress. Focus on the big rocks and forget about the pebbles, such as, supplements, taking multivitamins, like those little pebbles, just kick them out the way and focus on the big rocks: sleep, relationships, nutrition, and exercise. And with that, I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.